as the physical body was hardening and tending toward minerality and calcification, and the moon had to withdraw, and the spiritual beings had to pull out of the earth along with it in order to allow us to take over the body and render it pliable. And then here's a picture of the Gurtanum, the original building that burned down. It's a beautiful little building, and he just sort of designed it as this double dome shape, and every single detail in the building has a spiritual reference, as you would imagine. And the double dome represents his sort of idea of the ego. As I said before, when Steiner says ego, if you think of Jung's ego and Jung's self and put them together, you get the idea, and that's exactly what you've got here. The lower ego is involved with the body, it's this larger aspect, and the higher ego is the smaller one that inclines more toward the spiritual aspect. And then this is an interior diagram of that building, looked at from up above. And as you can see, it almost represents a human head. And that threefold theory that I just told you about is also recapitulated in each of those areas. The head recapitulates all three of those systems insofar as the brain is the center of the nerves and the senses. The breathing system, the circulatory system comes through the nostrils, and the digestive system is linked with the mouth. So that you have head as part for the whole here as an illustration of the entire body. Then you have the two domes as illustration of the lower spirit body and the higher spirit with the inclination toward the spiritual dimension. Notice that the spiritual aspect is right where the Agya chakra would be, and between the two eyes, that's the vision of the divine being, which is where the pineal gland is. And Steiner has some ideas about the pineal gland being this ancient faculty which enabled people to perceive into the spiritual realm, and as the body hardened over time, the pineal gland withdrew and we lost that ability to see into the spiritual dimension. And he has these, this is the central amphitheater, and the plays were performed here in the middle, right over the foundation stone where it was laid. And we have 7 rows of 2 columns each. Here are the columns. And these columns differ from the columns in the past insofar as that if you look at the columns of the past, there are 3 orders of Greek columns, you know, the Doric column, the Ionic, and the Corinthian. Here, each column has a unique capital, consistent with the age of the consciousness soul in which we are developing the idea of true individuality. Each individual is a species unto himself in this age. And consonant with that, at the top of each capital, there's a different motif that I don't have images of. I wish I did, but that links to one of these planetary epochs that we were talking about here a moment ago. And there's all kinds of other things going on. But, and that's the building that burned to the ground. In 1921, as he was having Saturn transiting right over his moon, that burned down. There's the new Gurtanum. As you can see, it's a very stern, forbidding, cyclopean building made out of concrete. Yes. And it's almost an aggressive response on his part, isn't it? After the first one burns down, the character of this is quite militaristic. It's lost its organic, lyrical, it's like, try to burn me down, you know. It's a very aggressive response to it. And it's built out of concrete, and there's the profile of that. And it's just not quite as beautiful as it was. But it was finished by, as he died as it was being built, and it was finished by the anthropologist. So that's just a little visual to break up the monotony here. So now, with respect to the creation mythology of Steiner, we begin with the Saturn epoch. And he doesn't give any dates for this. He doesn't say when this took place or anything. He just sort of says, if we were to go back in time and we were to transport ourselves to the Saturn age, what we would see are these angelic beings using the middle eye, not the eye of the flesh, but the eye of the spirit. It's the only way in which these things are visible until we get to the actual Earth phase, is you have these beings, and the first the most important being in this epoch are the thrones, or the spirits of will, and they sort of preside over this epoch. Spirits of will, because they sacrifice their substance, And the substance that they pour out, like a silkworm spinning out its substance, turns out to be the stuff that the human body's made out of. So they sort of pour this substance out, and they stream it out into this cosmic space. And as it comes out, the next hierarchy down, wisdom comes in, and you can sort of imagine this as this primary swirling whatever. And the spirits of wisdom then come in and stamp this thing with wisdom. So that you don't just have this mass of Schopenhauerian will to exist. You've got this intelligence that's stamped into it now. And they bring that in. And then we go down from the spirits of will, wisdom, to motion. And the spirits of motion descend into this and animate it. So now it turns into a kind of anima mundi. It's animate. Then we move down to the spirits of form who come in, and they dice this thing up, carve it up, and end up producing these little eggs of warmth. And this is the birth of the physical body. And it just sort of has this strange little nucleus in it with this lower part that's warm. And inside it's just purely warmth. So these are just bodies made up out of warmth. This epoch corresponds to fire. And the only thing he says you would notice if you were transported back into this epoch is this sense of warmth that these little eggs are radiating. So he's sort of retrieving the ancient myth of the birth of the cosmos from the cosmic egg, only notice that he's individualizing it. We don't have a cosmic egg, we have all these little individual eggs. And then, so the spirits of will, wisdom, motion, form, and then personality, the spirits of personality then come in. And they are the archai, and they are the human beings in this epoch. Which is to say that the spirits of personality then descend into this thing and inhabit it. They incarnate into these little eggs, and light them up, so that they are human within this, insofar as they are incarnating and just sort of dwelling within these eggs of warmth. And then the archangels, who are the spirits of fire, sort of come in and light it up with the rudiments of the sense organs, and it starts to glow, so that you have this sort of retrieval of the myth of in the beginning was the light, and the light shineth in the darkness. And it starts to light up. And then the angels at the bottom hierarchy come in, and they work in tandem with the cherubim to create a sense of basic metabolism within this entity. And that's really it for the Saturn epoch. What happens after that's done is that everything disintegrates and goes back into this swirling cosmic abyss for a pralaya. This is a Hindu term for the epoch of chaos in between world ages. The world ages are called manvantaras, and the dark epochs in between are the pralayas. So it all goes back in again. So it's almost as though the memory of the cosmos is sort of preparing itself for eventually to form these things as real, solid physical structures within the physical world. But first it has to learn how to do this. So it's teaching itself how to bring forth these forms. Then we move into the moon. Sun epoch. One other note about Saturn before we leave it is that there's a very tenuous relationship between the name of each epoch and the actual planets. They don't refer to those actual planets, which actually don't come into being until the Earth phase. But what they do refer to is the fact that the size of old Saturn was as wide around as now the orbit of Saturn is. So that's what it refers to. And what happens after the pralaya, and everything comes back again, the whole Saturn phase is recapitulated. They run through it again. And then the next thing they do are these cosmic beings come in and apply pressure to this. And the pressure that they apply densifies it and shrinks it to about the orbit of where Jupiter would be. And we'll see why this is called Sun. You can't confuse this with the Jupiter that's to come, so you don't want to call it Jupiter. But it's about the size of the orbit of Jupiter. Now, they compress it. And in compressing it, the warmth densifies into gas. So now you get air. So we go one element heavier than we had before with fire. So it's beginning to densify. And